Biblo might secretly have the forest god Devil Fruit, because chapter 1135 never actually confirms he has the Iku Iku no Mi. Lilith only says she thinks that's Biblo's fruit, and if Oda left that vague on purpose, then Loki's connection to Mosa, Biblo's role in the Owl Library, and all the Norse symbolism around Elbaf start looking way more suspicious. The Devil Fruit part might not even be the weirdest thing about Biblo, because the more I went back through the Elbaf chapters, the more Biblo started feeling less like a background character, and more like someone Oda keeps quietly placing around some really important shit. Ohara surviving books, forbidden history, ancient knowledge, preserved inside the largest library in the world. Literally. And somehow, Biblo is at the center of it all. I mean, think about how Biblo has been apparently around for centuries. What really convinces me that Biblo is way more special than we thought was how even Saul acts weird around Biblo in chapter 1182. And Saul is a giant who was a former vice admiral that's seen some pretty insane shit. Still admits Biblo is way more weird than he first thought. And honestly, Biblo started standing out to me even more once Ragnar got introduced, because if Biblo actually had the legendary Devil Fruit of the Forest God, that would make two non-human figures tied to protecting a legendary Devil Fruit across generations. Like what we have with Ragnar. Ragnar spent centuries guarding Elbaf's legendary Needhog Fruit until the right person was finally able to inherit it. It would make sense to have a parallel like that if you look at Biblo through the lens of the Forest God theory. Which brings me to my seemingly unrelated but related next point. I started thinking back to Loki secretly talking to the character Mosa, because Oda's already shown he likes attaching symbolic meaning to names connected to godlike figures like Nika and now Zaza, which is what started making me wonder if there was something deeper behind Oda introducing both Biblo and the character Mosa, because once you realize names like Nika and Zaza are tied to Japanese onomatopoeia, you can start to look at the name Mosa differently. Nika connects to smiling, Zaza connects to the sound of rain falling, and Mosa traces back to the onomatopoeia Mosa Mosa, meaning thick overgrowth and shaggy vegetation. So once you start to connect Biblo to the idea of the forest god, suddenly Oda introducing a character named Mosa in that exact same chapter stops feeling random, because at that point, it's starting to feel like Oda might have been quietly linking the two together from the very beginning. Most people reading the manga already know that Mosa was translated as Shaggy in the official version. That's because Mosa Mosa in Japanese is used for things that are thick, overgrown, hairy, or really shaggy looking. What made this even more interesting to me is that One Piece already has a non-canon Devil Fruit called the Mosa Mosa no Mi from Film Z. That fruit is specifically about making plants grow quickly and controlling vegetation. Now, that alone doesn't prove anything since it's non-canon, but it does show that the word Mosa has already been connected to heavy plant growth in One Piece related material before. And if the theory is true that Biblo secretly has some kind of mythical human fruit connected to the forest god instead of the Iku Iku no Mi, then the giantification part still fits surprisingly well too. Because after all, uncontrolled growth and expansion already connect pretty naturally to the idea of things becoming much larger than normal. So the idea of a forest god being connected to the name Mosa kind of makes sense, especially because Oda loves using strange names and details that seem unimportant at first, but later turn out to have a much bigger meaning. And I think the timing of all of this is what really makes it feel intentional, because the idea of the forest god didn't just come back randomly into the story either. The god of the forest was originally mentioned all the way back in Skypiea alongside the gods of the sun, rain, and earth. And now, during the final saga, Oda suddenly brings those ideas back again through the Harley and Elbaf. So now suddenly the same arc reintroducing the forest god is also introducing Biblo and the character Mosa. And with Oda, that kind of overlap is either completely meaningless or extremely not. Now, to be fair, there is a pretty big counter argument here, because Mosa Mosa can also just refer to someone being shaggy or heavily hairy in general. And One Piece actually brings that idea up through Neptune. When Harold jokingly talks about Loki potentially marrying Shirahoshi someday, he jokes that she'd probably end up shaggy like her father, which is why some readers started theorizing that Shirahoshi herself might actually be the character Mosa Loki's been talking to. And yeah, honestly, it's a fair interpretation. So I'm not saying Mosa automatically means forest god. I'm saying that the name starts feeling way more intentional once you place it next to the forest god being reintroduced through the Harley, Biblo suddenly becoming weirdly important in Elbaf, and Loki secretly talking to someone named Mosa in the exact same arc. Because at that point, the whole thing starts feeling really suspicious as hell. And honestly, one of the biggest reasons I keep coming back to the Biblo angle is the timing of everything. In chapter 1151, Mosa suddenly contacts Loki, thanks him for being a bro, and says they'll probably not be able to talk for a while. Then Mosa suddenly disappears. And during those same chapters, the God's Knights attack Elbaf and set the Owl Library on fire, the exact place Biblo protects. So now you have a mysterious character named Mosa suddenly vanishing around the same time the Owl Library is being attacked. The timing feels way too suspicious to completely ignore, because if Biblo is actually Mosa somehow, suddenly the entire situation starts making a lot more sense, especially if it turns out that Bibli secretly has the forest god Devil Fruit instead of the Iku Iku no Mi. Because One Piece has already established through characters like Chopper and Onimaru that human fruits can grant animals human level intelligence, speech, and identity, which suddenly makes the idea of Bilbo secretly becoming BFFs with Loki through a different identity sound way less insane. And if that's true, then Mosa disappearing right as the Owl Library comes under attack starts feeling less of a coincidence and more like Oda quietly linking the two together without fully revealing it yet. And the reason this theory even works for me at all is because Oda already built in the perfect red herring for it. Because again, chapter 1135 never technically confirms Biblo has the Iku Iku no Mi. Lilith only speculated that's Bilbo's fruit based on the giantification thing. And sure, the explanation is believable, but if Oda wanted to hide the idea that Biblo secretly has a completely different devil fruit instead, this is exactly how I think he'd do it, by giving readers an explanation that feels believable enough to stop questioning it. And if you really think about Bilbo being connected to the forest god somehow, Bilbo's role in the story starts to look very, very different and unique as a character connected directly to preserving history. Because when you really look at One Piece, forests and trees constantly get tied to knowledge and things survive through time. Ohara had the Tree of Knowledge, Zoe hid a road poneglyph inside the Whale Forest, the Shandians believed that the giant white trees at their home held the spirits of their ancestors, and now Elbaf's Owl Library, the place protecting Ohara's surviving books, exists on an island built around the massive treasure tree atom itself. So if Oda really is building toward the idea of a forest god, then the idea of that god being connected to preservation and memories starts to make a lot more sense. And this might also explain one of the most interesting lines in the Harley. The forest god tamed demons. At first, it sounds like it's talking about devil fruits, like the devil fruit tree taking dangerous powers and sealing them inside fruits. But the more you think about it, the more it seems like the line means something bigger than just powers or demons for that matter. The world government often calls forbidden things demons or demonic or evil. That's some public relations wizardry type shit. The scholars of Ohara were called demons. Robin was called the Demon Child, and anything connected to the hidden history of the world is treated like something dangerous that should be controlled or destroyed. So the idea of the forest god taming demons may not be about monsters at all, maybe even beyond devil fruits. It could mean protecting or controlling things that the rest of the world fears, and that sounds very similar to the role Biblo already has in Elbaf. And then the Norse mythology stuff makes this theory even harder to ignore because this shit starts lining up way too well. Elbaf already has its own version of Needhogger through Loki's Devil Fruit, and it already has its own Ratotskar with Ragnar. In Norse mythology, Ratotskar's whole job is basically being this furry little mailman running messages between Needhogg under the World Tree and the eagle sitting at the top. So the whole setup is about different characters connected through communication across different levels of the tree. Now look at Elbaf. You have Loki secretly talking to some character named Mosa, while Biblo, a giant bird living inside Elbaf's huge tree, is part of the exact same storyline. To me, that feels way too specific to be random, especially since Oda almost never copies mythology exactly. If Biblo and the Forest God are not only one and the same, but connected to protecting things that the world wants to erase, then that creates a really interesting difference between them and Emu. That becomes really obvious once you start looking at how Omen might actually work in the next video.